Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron,
And I'm Brett.
and you're listening to The Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
We know it's a dangerous business going out your door, or when choosing a podcast, but we're glad you've joined our adventure as we discuss The Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power.
And so it begins.
This week we're discussing Episode 5, Partings, in which the Harfoots have finally won over Silson's heart. Waldrig's illustrious campaign culminates in the slogan of the year, and we finally are leaving Numenor. At least that would appear to be so. Maybe we'll hang out there for another episode. But it's good to be back, Silson. Episode 5, Partings. I got to admit, the first time I watched the season, this wasn't my favorite episode. Probably my least favorite, but I think I have new opinions of it now. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that, like you said, new opinions. When you look back at it, there's some lovely little tidbits that at the time you're like, that told me nothing. Thank you. But being able to look back on it, it is actually a great back filler episode of oh, okay, there's some extra information on that plot line now that I know what that plot line is.
Yeah, there's some lines that you at face value first time you look through, just kind of throwaway lines. Later you find out those were foreshadowing moments, so that's fun.
They do a good job, if not maybe a little overextended, even on, like we've talked about. This whole season is all about who the heck is Sauron, and they do a good job of keeping everyone on the edge of their seats and trying to develop multiple characters into that potential bad guy. But this episode is a good example as you're watching it, as it's released, of it tells you nothing. You're still just wandering around in the dark at this point.
I remember thinking right at the beginning, absolute sure the stranger's a good guy. He's on the good side. And then by the end of the episode, oh crap, that he's Sauron. I'm sure of it. I remember listening to the producers, the showrunners of Rings of Power. They were being questioned of, is the show watchable if you already know who Sauron is? Once you find out, would anyone go back and watch it again? And I really appreciated what they said. They said when the movie The Titanic came out, every single person in the movie theater knew that the ship was going to sink. But that didn't ruin the enjoyment that you get out of watching it. I feel the same way with Rings of Power. I know that Halbrand is Sauron, but it doesn't lessen the enjoyment I get out of watching it. So
true. Yep. Should we dive in and do our first little topic?
Yeah, let's our good, bad, and great from episode 5. Why don't you start us off, Cameron? I know this will be a shocker for all of our listeners.
It will. First time, probably the only time the Harfoots are going to end up on the good side of this list. Yeah, I decided to throw them a bone, and I put them down for my good, specifically the scene with the walking song. And the tune was good, the lyrics were even better. Scenery was great as they did it. We didn't have to hear any whining or any ridiculous thoughts that they have. It was just a good song, good scenery, and I mean, as you know, it also was kind of the first indication as you're watching it of, I wonder if this is a connection to, foreshadowing that this stranger fella is Gandalf, because Part of the chorus in the song is "Not all who wonder or wander are lost." So, and which is obviously a quote tied back to Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings, right? So,
Yeah, and Matt, maybe you can help us. Gandalf, is it Gandalf writes a poem to Frodo with that line in it, or what is the connection? There is a connection to Gandalf. I picked up on that too, but what is that connection?
So Bilbo writes a poem about Aragorn, and then Gandalf quotes part of that poem in his letter to Frodo that Frodo receives from Barlam and Butterbur, the innkeeper at Bree.
Okay, so Gandalf uses this line, "Not all who wander are lost," and yeah, the song zooms in on Gandalf or the stranger looking up at the stars during that. I'll admit, I absolutely love the song. It was my great choice of the week. Originally, I listened to the song on repeat. I was in New Zealand a couple months ago and listened to the song over and over and over again. Uh, I think you made an excellent choice this week, Stilson. The Harfoots would be very pleased.
what was your good?
Mine's interesting. It teetered on the edge of bad, and I'll explain. It's the dueling lieutenants as opposed to the dueling right tenants.
Ah, yes.
I've never heard it pronounced with such a strong F before, but
Right
these
tenants don't duel is why you never hear about them.
that's right. But it's my good only because I found it kind of funny. We've got this gang of Numenorian soldiers who, if they can get a scratch on Galadriel, they get promoted to lieutenant, and it takes about 14 of them to surround her and get a scratch in her shirt. And the guy Elendil, he seems so very pleased with himself. Like, good for you, dude. Good for you.
I will, yeah, I will offer a little bit of a differing opinion on that one. I agree with you that 14 men against one person, no matter how good that person is a little ridiculous. And I'll also agree that when I heard the beginning of that contest, it was not a scratch but flesh. So I was expecting
That's
like
true. I
a
was so
good little
blood.
chunk.
Mm.
And all he did was scratch. All you could see, at least, was he cut her sleeve. There was no blood. There was
Some
no
scratched.
exactly. So I think she kind of gave him a little bit of a gimme. But the flip side of that is, I think that it was a big deal to be able to even touch her at all because these guys had never really seen combat, period. And to go against the woman who has lived for hundreds of years doing nothing but combat, and not only that, but is not even in their same league on day one of existence. She's an elf, they're men. Yeah,
So
I'm surprised that Elendil didn't promote him to admiral, honestly, if it was a true one-on-one battle.
uh, so that they did all right then.
But yeah,
I thought her
I think so. And I think that it's good to keep in context the promotion to lieutenant would actually be a big deal back then if you assume the same rank structure as the English Navy, right? That'd be like 3 officer rankings above the beginner. So it goes ensign, lieutenant, junior grade, and then lieutenant, the equivalent of like an army captain. So it'd be a big jump, especially if the dude is enlisted and not an officer. And back then, there were very few officers, even more so than today, on a ship compared to a regular sailor. So it would have been a big deal, I think, to get that promotion.
Yeah, make them feel good. I do have to say, her combat instruction that she does give about how to kill an orc seemed a little basic, but they were eating it all up. Just
So you stab him?
you
That's the
stab him,
grand secret? You stab him?
stab, pull the sword out of him. And they're all just like,
Yep. Oh,
whoa.
okay. Yeah, I would have never put that together.
So my confidence in men, like Elrond says in Lord of the Rings over and over again, men are weak. Yeah, I see where he gets that opinion.
Yeah.
All right,
Yep.
here we go.
All right,
Bad.
you want to do your bad?
I'll do my bad. I'll jump into my bad. My bad is Gil-Galad and Celebrimbor seem it seems obvious that they can read between the lines that the dwarves are mining mithril, but they're insisting on Elrond like spilling the beans, like confirming and breaking this oath that he's made. Like, you must tell us whether there's mithril or not. I'm like, you guys already know what you need to know. Gil-Galad's like, did they find the ore? Elrond's like, I can't tell you. Well, that's all you need to know. Why do we make a big deal out of making Elrond break his oath? Seems like they're the aggressive type. They just go do what they need to do with the knowledge that they have. It's just something that bugged me.
Well, do you think that? So, I guess help me understand what you're saying. Are you saying like, why are they having Elrond be the middleman instead of them just deal with the dwarves themselves?
It seems like at this point they now know, based on what Elrond has revealed, that there's something going on there, that their hypothesis is correct. And so at this point, what do they need Elrond for? What are they planning to do? Are they going to go march on Khazad-dûm?
I think that they are. Yeah, I think that they are short on time, right? That's why they needed to recruit the dwarven builders in the first place for the furnace.
It's got to be done by spring.
And I think that because of that, they know that the quickest and easiest way to obtain mithril is through Elrond's friendship connection to the prince.
Yeah, that makes sense. Fair point.
Okay, so my bad was in the Southlands. This thing has been brewing, right? With the orcs still digging these tunnels. The elves of the Watchtower have been defeated. It's all culminated now into this final ultimatum from Adar to the freemen of the Southlands. And in all this time, even since Arondir has been set free by Adar, which I'm assuming is at least a few days, it doesn't seem that it has crossed Arondir's mind yet that he should send someone or go himself in the fastest way possible to Lindon, or at least the nearest elven city or outpost, to let them know, hey, if you guys were looking for the horde of orcs, they're right here. And they have a leader who's an elf. You might want to come investigate.
Who wants to be a god?
Yeah, exactly. So that's my bad. I get that Arondir has a girlfriend in the area that he's looking out for, but that said, he could always send someone else in his stead. I mean, do something, right? Anyway, that was my bad.
Yep, fair enough.
My great. Okay, so my favorite part about this episode was the dilemma that Elrond faced between his race and his, I guess, government authority, and his friendship with Durin. And I think we'll get into this a little bit later more, but I just really I think I just grew to respect Elrond even more through this, dilemma that he had to work through.
I respect Durin for swindling a table out of the whole ordeal too.
He did turn that conversation on its head, didn't
he? He turned on the waterworks in his eyes and got himself a nice tabletop.
Yep.
we'll definitely talk about that. My great is Waldrig leading his coalition off to join with who he thinks is Sauron. We've got actually Halbrand's voice being overlaid, where Halbrand's explaining to Galadriel, back in the Southlands, I had to do something that I wasn't proud of. You don't know what I did. And so you're wondering this whole time, are we seeing a repeat of what Halbrand and his people did in joining Morgoth or Sauron or whatever? And anyways, Waldrig goes up to who he thinks is Sauron, professes his loyalty to him, gets throat slammed to the ground by Adar, and promptly says, "Well, whoever you are, I'll serve you. That's fine, no problem." And then Adar shows what I think a pretty evil side. He grabs Rowan, the twerp, and says, "Only blood can bind." And Waldrig thinks for like maybe a quarter of a second, and then promptly picks up the knife and goes and presumably slices Rowan's neck. Bit gruesome to think,
and
but
that was your great.
Very
telling. Very telling.
Well, getting a little dark. I thoroughly enjoyed the scene. I thought it was great. I love Waldrig as a character. I think he's so interesting. There's not a single redeeming quality about him. I don't know. I love watching.
Which makes you love him all the more.
Yeah, you just can't wait to see what he pulls next. And I will say, though, this group of Southlanders, and we'll get into it later, what a pathetic group. I almost sympathize with those who follow Waldrig because he's a better leader than Bronwyn is.
Yeah. And it's just kind of interesting, don't you think, that not obviously just in this context, but in pretty much any context where a person is trying to join a evil group, the initiation is usually an act of evil is required. I don't know what the psychology is on that exactly, but it seems pretty prevalent that is a theme. When you join an evil group, the initiation is some sort of evil act.
But hey, he's alive, and that's all that matters. With that, let's get back to Numenor. We haven't spent enough time in Numenor, apparently. So, Stilson, why don't you give us the rundown of what we did in Numenor this day?
And don't get me wrong, I am also tired at this point of we haven't left Numenor yet. But honestly, that's just because of the storyline. Because the storyline is always pointing you towards Middle Earth from Numenor, that's why you're like, "Kay, when are we leaving? Kay, when are we leaving?" The orcs in the Southlands, they're done with their tunnel, buddy. You need to get over there. I think that's kind of why we're still in Numenor. But there is so much to experience and learn in Numenor, honestly, and
it's like Disney
I think
World.
they did a great job with the visual representation of Numenor also. Every time they go to the harbor or to the palace, it's like, yep, this is visually pleasing.
Yep.
Anyway, just some of the highlights I took from Numenor in this episode is first one, there's the interaction between Elendil and Isildur when Isildur comes up to him and is like, I want to serve. I want to do something worthy of Numenor, and this is on the coattails of he just got kicked out of the Sea Guard, and he was only put into that trial because his dad pulled some strings, and so his dad's not very happy about that. And Elendil says to him, "Nothing would make me prouder, but you had your chance and you made your choice." And I was like, man, that's kind of harsh. Kind of made a comparison to parents today of like, you would never, I mean, I'm talking on average, right? But parents today would be like, sure, would you like me to give you the lieutenant job that I just made so-and-so, fight for or whatever? what can I give you, my child? Kind of an attitude. And it's like, uh, might be a good thing for parents to once in a while hold their child to some sort of accountability, instead of making it a soft landing everywhere they go.
And that's why we turned out so good, right?
Absolutely, yes. Isildur's sister is actually the cause of the ship bombing that almost killed Isildur, because she basically talks the son of Pharazôn into, you should do more.
Speak
If he's
louder.
not listening, if he's not listening, do something that will make him hear you. And yeah, she almost killed her brother from that. So that was interesting. I didn't notice that the first time going through.
Thanks, sis.
Okay, the next point is, you notice in this episode that Halbrand has secured for himself a nice guild crest, which I don't know if I noticed at the first time watching these episodes, but it did make me think, okay, he's got some skill, obviously. And you notice this by one of the guildsmen in the shop admiring his work on the sword, right? But then also you think, oh, Pharazôn, your little merit badge belt that you got going on there isn't actually as impressive as I thought. If old Halbrand could do it in 2 days. Anyway.
Is that crest that he has, is that the one that he just stole off the guys at the bar fight? And I mean, we don't see them again. Are they dead?
I don't think any of them died. One of them has a broken arm, though, obviously. I think that he would not be permitted to wear it around without people knowing that. I'm assuming that there's some sort of ceremony that goes along with this, and members of your own guild would absolutely know if they had seen you awarded the guild crest or not.
That makes sense. That makes sense. He is clearly a skilled artisan in the work of smithing.
Yeah.
Just a reminder that he was tutored under Aule, the Valar of smithing, right?
Right. Good callback. Yeah, so my next thought on the stuff going on in Numenor is Pharazôn's conversation with his son, when the son kind of confronts him of like, why are you going along with this elf lover, right? And Pharazôn basically explains to him, we're doing this in order to have a puppet king down in Middle Earth, and think of all the money and the trade and the resources that we're going to get from this deal. And it's like, being in America, I can see a direct correlation to those motivations today. Anyway, and then the last thing was, didn't notice this the first time, obviously, going through, but Muriel's father, the king, tells her all that awaits you in Middle Earth is darkness. And it's like, didn't know what that meant at the time. Exactly. Didn't know what that meant at the time, but now we do, and should have heeded his counsel.
Yeah, for all of his talk about supporting the elves and getting with the elves, for him to turn around and say, you can't go, don't go to Middle Earth, don't follow the elf. I thought it was pretty interesting. And then we find out she is handicapped and is in darkness permanently because she went.
Yeah, so. Especially the first time you watch it, right? You're like, I thought that the whole reason to go was because of your revelations, buddy. And now you're saying don't go?
Yeah. Oh, I'm getting excited already for the next episode. That's all right. Great rundown of Numenor. It ends right. We're actually on the ships leaving. Maybe we'll make it past the harbor this time. We shall see. Want to talk about a theme that I saw this episode, theme of ethical dilemmas and how we deal with ethical dilemmas. The first one is the Southlanders at Osterith. They're setting up camp. It's kind of reminiscent of the people of Rohan. at Helm's Deep, only like 100 times more pathetic. Like, these guys cannot fight.
At least 100 times.
You've got Bronwyn standing up on the rock wall trying to give a rousing speech, trying to be this mirror of Aragorn or something. And she's like, "Who will stand and fight?" And like 7 people kind of raise their hand, like, "Yeah, sure." My schedule's open. I don't have anything else to do tonight. And then you've got Waldrick down below, like, what the heck? We can survive. We could survive this thing. All we gotta do is just go team up with this guy. And a little back and forth with Bronwyn, and finally Waldrick says, you've got the quote. What is it, Silson, about our ancestors?
Yeah, Waldrig's campaign speech or campaign slogan is, I'll say this for our ancestors, they lived. Everyone else is like, sounds good to me, buddy. Where do I vote?
Where do I sign? Enlisted.
Yep.
And they're off. They march off.
It makes you wonder if Bronwyn's speech would have been listened to at all had Arondir the elf not been standing right next to her.
Ooh,
because let's be honest, he's the real reason people are like, maybe we have a chance. We have an elf.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, Waldrig's speech is so good it even convinces Bronwyn by the end of the episode. She's like, you know what? Screw it. Let's go. Let's join him. And Arondir has to get her back and say, no. This isn't just about us. This is about more than just us. And so this dilemma of, you could save your own life now, or you fight against very uncertain odds to protect other totally unknown people, which I think we can see commonalities with different dilemmas we face today.
Totally. But yes, as you said at the beginning, both sides just scream the quality of people coming out of the Southlands.
In the Lord of the Rings movies, Sam tells Faramir, when Faramir lets Frodo go with the rings, and says, "You've shown your quality, Faramir, the very highest." And I think these people have shown their quality. I don't think it's the very highest quality, but they've definitely shown it.
To get along.
The second ethical dilemma, back to Elrond and Durin. Elrond's made an oath, a very touching oath, that no other ears will ever hear the secret of the Mithril discovery. And then he gets back home and finds out that his people are essentially dying. And if they don't find a solution to the plague spreading through Middle-earth, then they will be forced to leave, and Middle-earth will be without their protection, and darkness will reign forever, blah, 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 blah. Like I kind of mentioned earlier, for whatever reason, he's being pressured into disclosing the nature of his oath to his superiors, and he's in this bit of a bind. And I think a lot of us can relate to this all the time. We've made a promise to do something or not do something, and all of a sudden the world has changed. The circumstances have changed. And let me just say, I think it's brilliant. I think it's something that people don't consider at all. In the moment, you feel like, wow, there is no alternative. There is no way out of this. What am I to do? Really, the best thing you can do is go talk to the person you made the promise to and explain the situation. And maybe they're okay with canceling or nullifying the oath, which is exactly what happened here. I was like, that was extremely simple, but very profound.
Yep, think outside the box, huh? But yeah, I as I said earlier in the episode, my favorite part of this episode was this whole interaction with Elrond and the conflict that he was facing. Him and Gil-Galad have a very frank conversation back and forth where, Gil-Galad is trying to convince him that this is more important than really anything else you got going on, Elrond. I don't know what your problem is and why you won't give me what I need. I'm only, asking because it's just the fate of the world and our race on the line. And Elrond tries making the point that, there's, in his esteem, more important things than just that in life. And I think that's a valuable lesson to learn, that both are important. And, maybe there are things that last longer and mean more than survival. But yeah, I think that, you see these two characters, and anytime there's a conflict or a disagreement between two people, you kind of have a default thought process that one is good and one is bad, one is right, one is wrong. I don't think that's the case in this scenario. I think that this is just an example of two good people trying their best to do what they think is best, and having a hard conversation about, coming together on what that is. And I think it was a good thing to watch.
That's what makes it a dilemma, right? If it was good versus evil, it's not really a dilemma. It's just about having the courage to make the right decision. What makes ethical dilemmas is that you've got either two favorable options or two unfavorable options, and the skill of navigating ethical dilemmas is what tools do I have at my disposal to make what I would consider a moral decision. So I thought the show did a great job with this. And I gotta say, Elrond's thrown out riddles like a burden shared can either be halved or doubled depending upon the recipient. And Durin's like, oh my word, give me a break with the riddles. Enough with the quail sauce. And I was feeling the same way. I love that they stick to their characters very much.
So you brought that quote up. I actually really liked that quote because it was a succinct way of saying something that I think you run into all the time. People have something on their chest that they need to get off, or they have an opinion about a certain thing that they know is a potentially sensitive topic for the person that they're communicating with. And yeah, you always have this worry of like, okay, well, if I say this, what are they what are they going to do with it? And yeah, very well said. Of a burden can either be halved, basically sharing the load, or it can be doubled, as in now not only do I have the original burden, but now I got the added burden of you being upset with me over the opinion that I had about it or whatever.
Very, very well written line.
Yeah, agreed.
What book does Durin's little one-liners belong in? Fetch your feathery shirts.
His belong in my book. That's the kind of quotes that I'd like to spout off.
He speaks your language.
He does. Right to my heart every time. But most dwarves do, honestly. Gimli in Lord of the Rings was right there. The Hobbit. Yeah.
Yeah. Another great episode.
The people that speak anti my language are the halflings, in case that was unclear.
So what is it about it? I feel like they're very similar. They speak in quips. They are just very endearing, and you just wish that they would be skewered and left on a pole for us to be waited for. We wait for you.
All right, here's a good difference. The quips that come from the hobbits and the Harfoots are about what flavor of tea they're having with the crumpets that night. And the quips from the dwarves are just classic slapstick comedy type things.
So you're saying you're Scottish and you despise the English.
That is an excellent way of saying it. Yes.
All right, it all makes sense now. Okay,
Yep.
moving on. In this story about a legend, we get a legend within a legend about where Mithril comes from. Silson, what on
Oh
earth
yeah.
is
Let's
this?
dive into that. So first of all, let's talk about the Cimmerils a little bit, right? So we know, as we've talked about already in the podcast, at least one of the Cimmerils, of which there are three, is now the Evening Star, being towed around by Elrond's father, Elendil, in the sky, right?
Yeah.
The other two, one was thrown into the ocean or into the sea. How deep? Don't know. The other one was lost
At least
in
50 feet.
a big old fiery pit. Okay, yeah, at least 50 feet. But for all intents and purposes, I believe that the common conclusion was that they were all lost except for the one in the sky, right? Now, the writers of Rings of Power are obviously trying to maybe not rewrite, but exploit a loophole, and maybe there was like some successful diving expedition that found one of these, or some archaeological excavation that found another one, or something. But somehow in their legend, one of the other two remaining Cimmerils was recovered or used somehow, or maybe it was straight from heaven with the evening star. Who knows? Anyway, the light of the Cimmeril somehow comes down from the sky into this tree, while this elf, who it said his heart was pure as Manway. I don't know if that speaks to his own personal righteousness, or if it is somehow related to the amount of power that he had. But he is fighting against this Balrog on the other side of this tree. The concept is very weird to me, honestly, because why would you fight with
He's
a
hiding
tree in the
behind a
middle
tree.
of you? Okay. And even if that is the case, why are, obviously elves have a relationship with plants that I do not understand, because I don't know why this elf felt like in a battle of life and death with one of the most evil creatures in existence, he thought that the best thing he could do was to pour his light into the tree. Maybe use it to defeat the Balrog. That's what I would use it for, but that's me. Anyway, so yeah, this battle's going on, and apparently the lightning hit, and this is how all of these mithril ore deposits were found in the mountain. Brett, what do you think about the realistic probability that this happened?
The probability that this happened in real life is 0%.
Not in real life. In real life, Tolkien universe.
In real life Tolkien universe, I was going to say, I can believe flying, ring wraiths and eagles and oliphaunts, but I draw the line at tree. Yeah, I think it's clear. I agree with the criticism. This seems like a little bit of a stretch to get a story in. I was anticipating that, okay, well, as long as it leads up to some sort of, Balrog battle here in the next episode or so, then cool. But we don't get that. Hopefully we get a Balrog next season, or it seems like we missed an opportunity. But yeah, for me, it kind of went over my head. Didn't really care for it.
I mean, I think it's a good legend of how the Mithril showed up. In that it connects a Cimmeril to the Mithril. I like that idea. Right?
And
That's
is
a
it
good idea.
Is it the mithril that's used ultimately in the end to forge the rings of power, at least within the TV series?
Yes.
Halbrand suggests that they make an alloy out of the mithril.
And I guess that's a good point, too, in that in The Lord of the Rings, you don't really get the impression that mithril has anything to do with light besides it's shiny. It's just like a special ore that is light, super heavy duty, impenetrable, but you don't really get any connection to light, right? It's interesting that they made that connection here. And I guess because they made that connection, I therefore like the connection from the mithril to the Cimmerils. But I think that they could have maybe come up with a better story of how it got there. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the jury's out on this one. The Balrog looked cool. I'll say that much.
I do think we're going to see one next season because they hint at one later on in this season. So
yeah. So that'll be good. And maybe we get our. Well, I was going to say maybe the stranger has a showdown with it, but that would kind of nullify what happens in the Fellowship of the Ring.
I wonder, honestly, if that ends up being the thing that drives a wedge between Durin and Elrond is Durin. I mean, we all know that Moria is where they mined mithril and they dug too deep and they uncovered a Balrog, which was the bane of Durin, and that ultimately the Balrog destroyed all the dwarves in that kingdom, right? So it makes you wonder. I wonder if Durin and Elrond have a falling out because Durin feels like that whole Balrog situation came about because of Elrond's, conniving and manipulations, and thinks that he should have just listened to his father the whole time.
Yeah.
Predictions.
I like it.
Yeah. I think the only other thing to touch on with the elves is it brings up again the line from her brother to Galadriel that sometimes to find the light we must first touch the darkness. And it makes you wonder if, did Galadriel need this experience with Halbrand and the ultimate betrayal that he was Sauron to be able to fully, bloom as a force for good in Middle Earth? I mean, she always has been, but it adds a lot more depth to your objective and to your character, maybe to know the evil that you are fighting against rather than just intellectually or academically. Well, I know he did this. I know.
Yeah, she comes
to have personal experience with it.
Face to face with the enemy that killed her brother. It's even brought up, right? He's like, "What? Whose dagger is that you carry? This is a vengeance mission." And she's like, "Yeah, he was killed by Sauron." And Sauron is right there in the room with her. And I think it's really interesting. He says, "I'm sorry about your brother. I'm sorry about everything." And man, that'll mess you up if you're Galadriel and you find out later that that was him the whole time.
It was him. Yep. All right, Brett, you want to finish us off here? Last topic.
Yep. I think the name of the episode, Partings, it has to do with, at least in part, the stranger is leaving our Harfoot camp after he saves a gaggle of them from the warthog wolves. I think he uses kind of a "you shall not pass" motion with his arm, slams it on the ground, blasts the wolves away, saves them. The Harfoots are like, "Oh, he is good, hooray, yay!" And we come back to him, and he's in a pool of water using some dark magic to heal his wounded body from this use of magic. Again, the theme of it's cold, it's freezing, which which there's no warmth, so that's a sign of evil. And you get some indications, oh man, is this guy good or is he bad? What is going on? He ends up hurting Nori, albeit it looks pretty unintentional. But basically, she runs away, and we're left with him. He is now separate from the Harfoot camp. And again, we start off the episode with just him helping these guys, and he's a team player. And we end with, is this guy good or evil? Is he Sauron? Could he be Sauron? Especially after we saw the mystics show up at the start of the episodes hunting for Sauron, and they're pretty confident that this is him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do in season 2. I feel like they are doing it. I like that they are kind of expanding the magical side of Lord of the Rings. I hope that they maybe do a little bit better job of explaining how it works, because maybe that's just my mind, but I always like to understand that part of how it works to kind of better see, what's possible. And yeah, it kind of makes you wonder, like, why did he get so, it was like he was in a trance while he was trying to ice his arm, and makes you wonder why that happened. Is magic such that you kind of have to, like, astral project yourself into the unseen world that it always talks about to bring the magic into the real world, or into the seen world, I guess. I don't know, but
it's this question of the power that they have as Istari. Is it by nature a peril, which is the word of the week for the stranger in his English lessons, is peril. Am I a peril?
Right.
Do I cause things to die? Poof, Firefly's dead. I must be peril.
Yeah, and that, speaking of, that was almost the bad on my list, honestly. That whole interaction of one moment he's like, oh, I'm a peril. And the next moment he's like, oh, I'm good. It's like, whatever you tell the guy, he's just going to eat up. And so at the time when you're watching this, right, as it's going through, you're like, okay, well, maybe he really is Sauron and just has no idea who the heck he is, and because he's just adopting whatever anyone tells him. But then on the other hand, especially now that you know that he's probably Gandalf, you're like, at least I am, how can you be so oblivious to everything? Like, you don't even know if you're good or evil. Anyway, yeah, and I made the comment that, Nori could have told him he was a llama and he'd have believed it.
I am llama.
Exactly. But yeah, I did think it was a good portrayal, though, of the principle with the Astari, that they're sent here mainly to be guides to help other races and people conquer Sauron and his minions, and not they themselves do it. And you kind of get a glimpse of that when he uses his power, but his body is pained and damaged by doing so.
It's a little out of control.
Yeah, I'll give you my quote of the week. Not really, but one that I thought was hilarious is
these are both Stilson's quotes of the week.
Oh yeah, I guess they both are. But first favorite quote of the episode is when Durin is having dinner with the elves and Gil-Galad is questioning him about, what's going on with Khazad-dûm. You guys are bustling down there. And Durin tries to turn it back on him, like, I could ask the same for you. What's going on with Linden? You guys are expanding your cities, sending your armies places. And the quote is, typically takes you people weeks just to decide to take a... And then kind of cuts him off, but I loved that part, especially with the context that he's saying it to the High King of the Elves. So the real quote of the episode is the discussion with Elrond and Gil-Galad, where Elrond says, "I swore an oath to Durin, to some that may now hold little weight, but in my esteem it is by such things our very souls are bound. I do not intend to let mine slip away on the basis of mere hope." Gil-Galad responds, "Hope is never mere, Elrond, even when it is meager. When all other senses sleep, the eye of hope is the first to awaken, last to shut." Both quotes, awesome. Like, both statements, awesome. Elrond, I loved it for, highlighting the importance of keeping your commitments and your promises. And then also Gil-Galad's for how important and strong hope is.
Well said. Well said. We hope you've enjoyed your time with us on episode 5, Partings. Check back with us for our next episode, number 6, Udun, possibly the best episode of the season. We finally get to see what's going on in the Southlands, get introduced to the doom that is down there. Thanks for joining us on the Last Alliance Rings of Power podcast. Thank you for joining our fellowship on this episode of the Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
And if you enjoyed this episode even half as well as you should have liked, or liked half of it half as well as it deserved, please subscribe, comment, and share.
We'll see you next time.